Welcome to Today in Black History. I'm Alicia Melton, and today I'm going to talk about Stokely Carmichael, also known as Kwame Ture. And today, on June 16th, 1966, is when he first publicly spoke of Black Power. And so, in my reading, I am going to talk about his activism and events that led up to his Black Power speech. And so, as I'm reading, if you have any information that you would like to add, please do so in the comments section. Okay, so I'm going to get started. Stokely Carmichael was a civil rights activist born in Trinidad. He immigrated to New York City in 1952. In 1954, at the age of 13, Stokely Carmichael became an American citizen, and his family moved to a predominantly Italian and Jewish neighborhood in the Bronx. He attended Bronx High School of Science, where he was introduced to an entirely different social set, the children of New York City's white liberals. Carmichael was popular among his new classmates. However, even at that age, he was highly conscious of the racial differences that divided him from his classmates. Carmichael later recalled his high school friendships in harsh terms, stating that now that I realize how phony they all were, how I hate myself for it. Being liberal was an intellectual game with these cats. They were still white and I was black. Although he had been aware of the civil rights movement, it was not until one night toward the end of high school when he saw footage of a sit-in on television that Carmichael felt compelled to join the movement. He stated, "When I first heard about the Negroes sitting in at lunch counters down south, I thought they were just a bunch of publicity hounds. But one night when I saw those young kids on TV getting back up on the lunch counter stools after being knocked off them, sugar in their eyes, ketchup in their hair, well, something happened to me. Suddenly I was burning." He joined the Congress of Racial Equality, also known as CORE. He picketed a Woolworth store in New York and traveled to sit-ins in Virginia and South Carolina. He attended Howard University. He majored in philosophy. At the same time, Carmichael continued to increase his participation in the movement itself. While still a freshman in 1961, he went on his first Freedom Ride. And this is an integrated bus tour through the South to challenge the segregation of interstate travel. During that trip, he was arrested in Jackson, Mississippi for entering the whites-only bus stop waiting room and was jailed for 49 days. Undeterred, Carmichael remained actively involved in the civil rights movement throughout his college years, participating in another Freedom Ride in Maryland, a demonstration in Georgia, and a hospital workers' strike in New York. He graduated from Howard University with honors in 1964. Carmichael left school at a critical moment in the history of the civil rights movement. The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, known for the summer of 1964 Freedom Summer, rolled out a campaign to register Black voters in the Deep South. He joined the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee as a newly college graduate. He was appointed field organizer for Lowndes County, Alabama. When Carmichael arrived in Lowndes County in 1965, Black Americans made up the majority of the population, but remained entirely unrepresented in government. In 1 year, he managed to raise the number of registered voters from 70 to 2,600, 300 more than the number of registered white voters in the county. Unsatisfied with the response of either major political parties to his registration efforts, Carmichael founded his own party, the Lowndes County Freedom Organization. To satisfy a requirement that all political parties have an official logo, he chose a Black Panther. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale asked for permission to use the Black Panther emblem for their newly formed Black Panther Party later. So, Lowndes County Freedom Organization members didn't simply want to vote to place other whites in office. Instead, they wanted to be able to vote for their own candidates. So, I have a question. How do you think, this is Lowndes County, Alabama, and from what I'm reading, it's a county between Selma and Montgomery. And so some of us know about Selma, the march, and also the Montgomery bus boycott. So who could tell me, what do you think was the white residents' reaction to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee forming their own political party? What do you think what some of their reactions were to this? Just let me know. They wanted their own candidate. They wanted someone that looked like them. Yes, definitely. Violence and intimidation. Yes, change in the voting laws. So I'm going to read to you. Yes, the KKK, they were outraged. Yes. So I'm going to read to you some of the things that they have done. And if you're familiar with Black history, and anytime there was an effort for progress, it was fought back with violence. And so let me just read some of the things. White voters in Lowndes County reacted strongly to this new organization. In many instances, whites evicted their sharecroppers, leaving many blacks homeless and unemployed. They refused to serve any members of the organization in stores and restaurants. There were small riots broke out, with the local police often firing only on blacks during these confrontations. The organization, however, did push forward and continue to organize and register to vote. In 1966, they did have their own candidates who ran for office in general election, but failed to win. So you could probably kind of figure out there were probably some tampering with votes for their candidates not to win. Because I just stated earlier that they actually had 300 more blacks. There were 300 more black residents who were had registered to vote than white voters. So we can probably see where there was something happened to the. And this is just me. This is not what I read, but it's clearly there should have been some winners from their political party if they had more registered voters, more black registered voters than whites. All right, let me continue. At this stage in his life, Carmichael adhered to the philosophy of nonviolent resistance embraced by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In addition to moral opposition to violence, supporters of nonviolent resistance believed that the strategy would win public support for civil rights by drawing a sharp contrast captured on nightly television between the peacefulness of the protesters and the brutality of the police. However, as time went on, Carmichael, like many young activists, became frustrated with the slow pace of progress and with having to endure repeated acts of violence and humiliation at the hands of white police officers without help. By the time he was elected national chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in May 1966, he had largely lost faith in the theory of nonviolent resistance that he and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had once held dear. As chairman, he made it clear that white members, once actively recruited, were no longer welcome. The defining moment of Carmichael's tenure as chairman, and perhaps of his life, came only weeks after he took over leadership of the organization. In June 1966, James Meredith, a civil rights activist who had been the first Black student to attend the University of Mississippi, embarked on a solitary march against fear from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi. About 20 miles into Mississippi, Meredith was shot and wounded too severely to continue. Carmichael decided that the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee would carry on the march in his place. And it was also other civil rights leaders and other organizations also who joined the march as well. And upon reaching Greenwood, Mississippi, on June 16th, a furious Carmichael gave the address for which he would forever be remembered. He stated, "We've been saying freedom for 6 years." And that's how, at that time, he's speaking of for his organization, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which was started in 1960. So at this time, it was 1966. So he's saying for 6 years, we have been screaming freedom. And he said, what we are going to start saying now is Black Power. The phrase Black Power quickly caught on for the younger generation of the civil rights movement. So I'm going to stop here and just get some of your comments on what do you think? What does Black Power mean to you? What do you think Black Power meant to Stokely Carmichael at that time in 1966? Just want to hear some of your thoughts, and what do you think? And if some of you may have been around that time, what at that time, what did Black Power mean to you? And what does Black Power mean today? Just want to get your thoughts on that. Yes, taking back what is ours to have. What else? I believe, Javo, I believe it's Black excellence and taking up for ourselves. Yes, empowerment, empowering ourselves. Anyone else? from color to Black people. Okay. Being able to what, self-identify. So I'm going to read from his book of what he stated in his book 1968. And the name of the book is Black Power, The Politics of Liberation. Yes, pride in who we were. Yes. So in his book, the Black Power, The Politics of Liberation, he explained the meaning of Black Power. It is a call for Black people in this country to unite, to recognize their heritage, to build a sense of community. It is a call for Black people to define their own goals, to lead their own organizations. Okay. And he strongly believed that because when he was part of Student Nonviolent when he was the chairman for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, that's exactly what he did. He made the decision that white members were no longer welcome in the organization, and he believed that Black people should be the ones leading leading the movement. Let me move. In 1967, Carmichael traveled outside the United States to visit with revolutionary leaders in Cuba, North Vietnam, China, and Guinea. Upon his return to the United States, he left the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and became Prime Minister of the Black Panthers. He spent the next 2 years speaking around the country and writing essays on Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism, which ultimately became Carmichael's life cause. In 1969, he quit the Black Panthers and left the United States to take up permanent residence in Guinea, which he dedicated his life to the cause of Pan-African unity. He stated, "America does not belong to the Blacks." Explaining his departure from the country, Carmichael changed his name to Kwame Ture to honor both the president of Ghana and the president of Guinea. In 1968, he married Miriam Makeba, a South African singer. After they divorced, he married a Guinean doctor. Although he made frequent trips back to the United States to advocate Pan-Africanism as the only true path to liberation for Black people worldwide, Carmichael maintained permanent residence in Guinea for the rest of his life. He was diagnosed with prostate cancer in 1985 and has said publicly that his cancer was given to what he stated. Cancer was given to me by forces of American imperialism and others who conspired with them. He died on November 15, 1998, at the age of 57. So more books by Stokely Carmichael to learn more about him. I mentioned Black Power, The Politics of Liberation. Another one, Ready for the Revolution. And Stokely Speaks from Black Power to Pan-Africanism. And you can learn more from blackpast.com and history.com. So just reading over some about his life and his activism, you saw where he participated. He was involved in several movements. So what do you think about Stokely Carmichael? What else can you add to what I have not mentioned, that what you know about Stokely Carmichael, and And why do you think that at some point he felt like the tactic of nonviolence no longer worked? Good morning, Ethan Payne. So this is for Ethan. We're talking about Stokely Carmichael, also known as Kwame Ture. And today is when he first spoke publicly about Black Power. And so I just read over about his activism and events that led up to his speech about Black Power, and I just asked, why do you think he no longer believed in nonviolence, that tactic uh, move move forward in addressing some of the issues of equality or justice here in the United States. So Ms. Brannon stated, he realized that power is not given, you must take power. This may involve violence. Thank you. And Mr. Brannon, Stokely was a young activist who grew impatient with the slow progress of the nonviolent movement. Yes. Right. So he was in CORE, and he was also in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which both those organizations, they practice the nonviolent tactic. Sometimes violence or aggression is the only way for true awareness to situations of injustice. Yes. And also, I think, keep in mind, like, self-defense, especially with the killing of nonviolent leaders. Yes. Any more comments about Stokely Carmichael? So what do you think about his decision when he was the chairman for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, when he no longer wanted white members to participate in the organization? He finished Howard in 3 years. Let me look through my notes. So he started. Oh, he probably started. So what I have, he was a freshman in 1961. And when do I have him graduating? So he probably started in 1960, because in my reading I have Wow still a freshman in 1961. So this could have been in the spring of 1961 with the Freedom Ride. So he probably entered in 1960 and he graduated in 1964. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end this live. So this was Stokely Carmichael, also known as Kwame Ture. Oh, he was radicalized, this Mr. Brandon. He was radicalized by the attempted killings of blacks by whites and was discouraged by these acts by whites. Yes, so he saw that, working with these other, being actually involved and using the nonviolent tactics, and he saw that it wasn't working, and that he wanted to move, and he wanted to move, try some of the other tactics of, um, like Malcolm X, promoting self defense, not any senseless acts of violence, but being able to protect ourselves. Were there interactions between him and King? Yeah, so there were interactions between him and Dr. Martin Luther King, because the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee actually was supposed to have been a youth group out of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. But I believe Ella Baker, who was actually the advisor who helped form this group, told the students to act, independently. And so there were interactions between them, where Dr. Martin Luther King did give them, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, advice on, certain issues, but because they were a younger group, they did not always follow some of his advice, which was probably some of the tension that they had amongst the two groups, because Dr. King did not support when Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael made that comment about Black Power. He did not agree with that statement, along with other civil rights leaders, did not also approve of that statement, Black Power, which we know is really Black nationalism, which is what he was promoting. But there's also a lot of, if you want to hear more of his speeches, there are a lot of speeches of him on YouTube, also where he's sitting on several panels, giving his point of view, his perspective on how Black people should have moved. This is when he was still living in the States, how we should move forward in this country. Okay, well, thank you everyone for listening. And like I mentioned before, he has three. Why do you feel that Stokely is not widely discussed or given accolades for his work? Well, so based on what I read, and I kept seeing this term, Black separatism, which is, I think also is maybe the same as Black people see it the same as Black nationalism. So when you're saying, separating yourself from white people, not uniting with other groups, I think you tend to be isolated. He was tend to be isolated from, or not welcomed by other civil rights leaders. So I think it was with his mission of being separate, similar to Marcus Garvey. philosophies, having a nation within a nation, separating ourselves, going, even he went back, he, meaning Stokely Carmichael, he eventually moved permanently to Guinea. So I believe that's probably one of the reasons what his tenure as leader was relatively short when he fled to Africa. Okay, so that could also be another reason too. He left. He left the United States and to start his efforts towards Pan Africanism. Anyone else have a comment on that? Why you think Stokely is not as popular as the other civil rights movements? I mean, civil rights leaders. Separatists were never given their due. The struggle. Okay, I understand that. The struggle, so Mr. Brandon said the struggle was generally about integration, not separatism. Right, so I understand that. So then let me ask everyone here, do you think that because I hear people still talk about separatism, especially in what's going on today. What do you think about that now? Of some people still believe in that? Okay. Okay, so not too possible in the USA, maybe in a black country. Okay. Hello, Destin's Affair. Excuse me. We were I'm about to close, but we were talking about Stokely Carmichael today. Thank you for joining. So uh again, just read more about Stokely Carmichael. Um and like I said, there's a lot of footage of him on YouTube. You can also check online, read some of his books that he wrote. And and I think I'm going to go ahead and sign out. So thanks again for watching, and thank you for the discussion. And I will see you next Tuesday. Take care.